Well, it's now 5 past the opening hour, and we're a little over half, so I think I will begin the formal housekeeping part of the meeting, if that's okay with the organisers. If it's not, please shout at me. And hello everyone who's joined us today, good morning. My name is Caroline Morgan and I'm IFRO CEO and Secretary General, and I'm delighted to welcome you all. In particular, I'd like to welcome our speakers, in particular, Mr. Victor Negrescu, MEP, Mr. Georgi Dimitrov from the European Commission, and Dr. Igor Pesek from the upcoming Slovenian presidency of the Council of the EU. I would also like to welcome our expert panelists, and they will be introduced to you individually later in the meeting. I would also like to welcome all of the IFRO, EVA, EWC and FEP members who have joined us today, and all of the other guests that have joined the meeting. Before our President, Ingvar Sletholm, formally opens the meeting, I want to share with you a few housekeeping rules. Firstly, as I think you're all aware, this meeting will be recorded and made available together with the presentations following the event by the co-organisers IFRO, EVA, EWC and FEP. The second thing I'd like to let you know is that because we are such a large group, we're using the webinar format on Zoom for the meeting. So as a result of using that format, you will only see the speakers, not all the other participants. Following the panelists' presentations, participants will have the possibility of putting questions to the panelists. Now, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand and the chair of the session, Ingvar Sletholm, will invite you to ask your question subject to time and availability. We will then activate your microphone, and it may take a few moments to be able to do that, so please give us a few seconds to do so. I also urge you not to ask questions as part of the chat function. It will not be monitored for that purpose, and therefore, although you're welcome to provide comments, there will be no questions taken from the chat function. And I look forward to hearing as much feedback and as many questions as we possibly can from the audience today. And now my very last task this morning is to introduce IFRO's President, Ingvar Sletholm, and ask him to formally open the meeting. Ingvar, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline, and good morning, everyone, and heartily welcome to this panel session, to this digital session. My name is Ingvar Sletholm, and I'm president of IFRO, which I suppose you know is the international network of collective management organizations and creators and publishers associations in the text and image spheres. Together with our members, EVA, the European Visual Artists, EWC, the European Writers' Council, and FEP, the Federation of European Publishers, we are delighted to bring you the second Restart Conversations webinar entitled Investing in a High-Quality Digital Educational Ecosystem is Investing in Democracy. Education is the key to democracy, to opinion forming, freedom, and social values. Authors, illustrators, and publishers have for years provided innovative learning materials, including in digital format, materials that can be licensed for educational purposes. In addition, collective management organizations have developed complementary licenses. The pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis in particular has shown the importance of having digital access to teaching and education materials. We are delighted that at our event today, we will hear from author, publisher, visual artist, and CMO representatives from the text and image sectors who will discuss, together with representatives from the EU institutions, the importance of investing in a high-quality digital education ecosystem and how the needs of a democratic society can be met, as well as the needs of writers, illustrators, and publishers in the education sector. Firstly, a very warm welcome on behalf of all of us to the representatives from the European Parliament, European Commission, and the upcoming Slovenian presidency of the Council of EU, who have kindly agreed to speak to us today. We are delighted that you're here and we're proud to have you with us. Victor Negrescu, who is a member of parliament, and Georgi Dimitrov from the European Commission will open the event with their speeches. And then at the end, Dr. Igor Pesek from the upcoming Slovenian presidency will provide some closing comments. Over the last few months, these three EU institutions have set out their ideas about how to best approach digital education going forward, also in the light of the COVID crisis, and we're looking forward to hearing more about their work and their perspectives. A warm welcome also to our author, publisher, and visual artist and CMO representatives, who I will introduce shortly ahead of our interesting panel discussions. Let's now then turn to our opening speakers. First, Victor Negrescu, Member of Parliament, who is the Vice President of the Committee on Cultural Education in the Parliament. He is part of the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. He strongly advocates for consistent investments in education, culture, digitalization, and youth by member states and the European Commission. Prior to the current parliamentary term, Mr. Negrescu was the Romanian Minister Delegate for European Affairs, and prior to this, he was a member of the European Parliament, winning in 2015 the title of Member of the Parliament of the Year for the Digital Agenda. He holds an MBA in Executive Business and a PhD in Development Cooperation. So we're looking forward to listening to you, and over to you, Mr. Negrescu.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the nice presentation. I'm happy to be with you today, of course, and speak as Vice Chair of the Culture and Education Committee on an important issue, of course, is how we can make education more inclusive while in the same time tackling the issue of modernization of education. And this aspect, of course, includes digitalization. And of course, it takes into consideration, like you very well underlined, the importance of creators in the process and the very importance of having an educational content that is adequate for those changes, while in the same time, of course, making sure that we have, of course, a process of transformation that takes into consideration the voices of everyone willing, again, to help education across Europe, of course, and respectively in each member state. So recently, the European Parliament has come up with a couple of proposals, documents that are very important for us, that we support strongly, and this has been underlined also in the wide support that those documents have been given by the Parliament as a whole with the vote of our colleagues in the plenary. We have a specific resolution focusing on education, resolutions focusing on the need to develop the European education area, on the need to make sure that the effects of the pandemic are being reduced, making sure that education is being inclusive, while at the same time dealing with the new digital and green transformation. We have this resolution, and I'm going to mention that. And in the same time, we have a report that I had the pleasure to coordinate as a rapporteur on how we can shape a digital education policy. And of course, in those respective documents, we speak, of course, about the need, and this is the particular issue that, of course, I'm certain might interest you. We speak about the need of having adequate content that is adapted, first of all, to the needs of children, of learners as a whole. And this means, of course, a lot of efforts, because we know that today we need to particularize, to adapt, to customize more and more the educational process. And in order to do that, of course, it is quite essential, of course, to have the content that is being developed that is adapted to those needs. This means that it has to be adapted based on age, based also on the background, based on the type of expertise that learners need to acquire, based also on the needs of professors, but also based on the needs of the communities that want to develop and underline certain types of skills or certain types of values. And of course, it's easy to speak about that. It's easy to mention that, but it's harder again to build all of that. Because of course, building such content, which might be in physical or digital form, requires a lot of efforts and a lot of creativity, but also a lot of production efforts, to be very frank, requiring the need, of course, to not only ask for this transformation, but also to work together with creators of educational content that are capable to provide such added value to the educational process. Of course, we often speak at European level about two things. And to be very frank, sometimes, again, I notice that we have, unfortunately, maybe ignored, again, at some point, the voice of such creators. But we speak about two things. We speak about a multi-stakeholder approach, and we speak about the co-creation approach. And indeed, in this respect, of course, if we take into consideration these two elements, we see, and I personally see, a big role played by those creators in the process. So this is why, of course, I'm certain that in the creation of the new consultation infrastructure regarding the digital education process, if we speak about the stakeholders consultations, if we speak about the digital education hubs, it is required, of course, and it might be suited to have creators on board in those hubs, in those structures of consultations, to bring additional input that might help us, of course, achieve this transformation that currently is needed. Of course, this transformation requires to adapt traditional education, person-to-person education, but we also refer, of course, to digital forms of education, which is even harder to deal with. And of course, what we have to make sure is that in this process of transformation to digital forms of education, we protect also creators in an adequate way. And we avoid, of course, what sometimes has happened. Again, we avoid, again, the problems that are generated by the non-respect of copyright legislation. We also avoid, why not at the same time, again, a sort of educational dumping with low quality content. And this is something that, of course, has to be taken into consideration. There are a lot of elements, of course, to deal with. And of course, a lot of efforts of reflection that are needed from all European institutions, but also by member states. And I tend to believe that this cannot be done only at local or national level. Despite education being a national competence, we tend to believe in the European Parliament that we need a European approach on many things. And this might be one of those things where discussing together, we can construct and build and identify an added value that can be brought by Europe on this important matter, in creating a level playing field, while in the same time avoiding differences, inequalities, but also gaps in terms of access to high quality content that is required today for the educational process. And unfortunately, we saw that also during the pandemic. Some schools, I'm not speaking about countries here, some schools having access to high quality content in digital forms, and other schools, unfortunately, that couldn't get access to that content. And this is an issue, and this is a problem. And of course, in the same time, this requires an effort at the level of each Ministry for Education to develop such infrastructure and to learn how to build that in different forms, in being transparent, in being open, in working a lot with professors, in working also with parents, in working with pupils, learners, but also in working with creators like yourself. So this is really a complicated issue, but it's an issue that has to be raised. And I'm certain that you are going to do that in the conference today. The last element that I want to underline is that it is clear that we cannot speak today about digital education as being something that is separate from traditional forms of education. In my opinion, we speak about an integrated view, an integrated vision of what education needs to be today and what certainly it will be tomorrow. So we need, of course, also an integrated approach on how we can digitalize our educational system, keep the important role that professors have, value the creators of educational content, and of course, push for modernization, but also for high quality standards. This is why in my report on digital education, I call upon and I request and I ask from my friends from the Commission that are also present here, with whom I had a very good contact, also to work together in building those quality standards that can become a reference for member states, for ministers, for ministries for education, on how to deal to all those challenges that I have underlined in my vision. I'm certain that the European Parliament, together with the Commission, together with Commissioner Gabriel, together with many ministers, and together with you and other relevant stakeholders, we can identify the way to approach that. So I'm very keen in hearing all of you and having additional inputs. And I'm certain that this issue most probably will be raised in details in the weeks and months to come, at least in our work in the European Parliament. Thank you again for the invitation, and I hope that my intervention helped us, why not, frame a little bit the debate and at the same time underlining some of the risks and challenges. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Negrescu. Thank you for lifting up the added value that digital content can bring, and also for focusing so strongly on quality of the content. We welcome your support and the support from your fellow MEPs, and we're happy to continue working with you on this important topic. I would now like to introduce Georgi Dimitrov, who is the head of unit for digital education in the Commission's Directorate General for Education and Culture. Georgi joined the Commission in 2008 and has had various roles, including setting up the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, EIT. In 2017, he became Deputy Head of Unit for Innovation and EIT, responsible for the EIT, Digital Education and Innovation and Education. Prior to that, Georgi managed the launch of HE Innovate, an initiative by the Commission and the OECD that supports entrepreneurial and innovative universities. He studied at the University of Bonn and the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, where he holds a PhD. And please, the floor is yours, Mr. Dimitrov.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ms. Morgan. Good morning, Ingve. I turn to you with the first name as you proposed. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks to IFRO, EVA, EWC, and FEP for this invitation. I'm delighted to be with the creators community today, and to help perhaps also contribute to this very important topic that you have addressed. I think that the topic that you have chosen rhymes very nicely personally with me, but also with the work of the Commission. You have investing in a high quality digital education ecosystem. In the title, this is one of the two core priorities of the Digital Education Action Plan that we adopted last year. And I think the link that you make to democracy and citizenship is particularly important going forward through this transformation, which is quite significant and with a lot of importance for actually the future of democracy itself. I want to touch upon 3 points. The work that we do on digital education, I will be a bit more operational to tell you what we are actually currently doing. I would like to link to the investment question, which is very, very important and currently quite topical. And finally, I would say something about the link of digital education and citizenship, democracy. I will conclude with a specific reference to the copyright directive, which I will do also on behalf of some colleagues in DG Connect, but since the Commission speaks with one voice, I will do that. So I want to thank, of course, MEP Negrescu for the support and for the looking forward approach that he has taken in the Parliament. He has accompanied our work and critically and constructively accompanied it with ideas that bring this work forward. I would also say that it is very, very important that the three institutions are aligning around the topic, and I'm very glad that also the presidency of Slovenia is here. The presidency will also contribute to the discussion, just like the other presidencies so far, at least the last three. So let me start with the framing of the work that we are doing. We have proposed last September a Digital Education Action Plan, which is a multi-annual initiative. One of the objectives, one of its two core objectives is to develop this high-performing digital education ecosystem. And as Mr. Negrescu said, this is actually much more difficult in the digital world than even in the physical, where it is almost very, very, very difficult. And when we speak about a high-performing digital education ecosystem, we do include things which are more trivial, like connectivity, equipment, and infrastructure. But we also need to think about platforms, services, tools, as well as, very importantly, high-quality digital education content. And it is only when these things click that we can achieve an inclusive and high-quality education. And this is very difficult, which is why also we have set this more as a vision for the next 7 years. In addition to it, we have a second core priority in this Digital Education Action Plan, which is to support the digital skills and competences of the population, which is not new, but increasingly critical, just like reading or writing and math. In the current context, the Commission has actually decided to create a new unit on digital education, which I have the privilege to lead on the 1st of January. And we have already launched a few of the actions of the action plan. I want to just give you a small overview. We are about to propose a council recommendation on online and distance learning for primary and secondary education, which reflects the lessons from COVID and looks into this integrated approach that also Mr. Negrescu spoke of. We subscribe to this vision. We are preparing a high-level strategic dialogue with the member states to engage them in the digital education discussion at the highest possible level politically. We are working on specific parts of education and the intersection between AI and data on the one side, as well as tackling disinformation on the other side. We have launched a call for experts on AI. We just closed it. Currently, we have another one on tackling disinformation and promoting digital literacy. It is open right now. And we have launched a feasibility study on the possible creation of a European exchange platform to share content. Now, in addition to those things which are just ongoing as I speak to you, we have some more long-term actions which are being prepared. I would like to mention two of them. One of them is the Digital Education Hub, which Mr. Negrescu also referred to. This is an ambitious initiative to promote better cooperation and exchange on European level on digital education. And it will be cross-sectoral and include a variety of stakeholders. It will be also open, of course, to the creators community. A call on the Digital Education Hub is going to be out by the end of this month. And secondly, I would like to mention that we are at the beginning of the preparation of a European digital content framework that we want to propose in 2023. It should build on European cultural and creative diversity and include principles which are important for the digital education aspects, such as the need for high quality instructional design, accessibility, but also transferability. And these are things that will take some time before they work out. And we are very happy that we started some conversations, and also the European education publishers participated there very impressively last 20th of May. So we are continuing this discussion. Second point, investment. There are several sources for education, for investment in digital education. I would like to mention perhaps two of them. The Erasmus program, which with the help of the Parliament has been increased quite substantially, And we have launched in March the call, whereby we are supporting several aspects directly linked to the implementation of the action plan. Let me mention 3 of those. First, the digital opportunity traineeships for higher education students, which we have now extended to VET and staff. Secondly, we have for the first time launched and included actually digital transformation plans for any type of education and training institutions as a part of the cooperation priority. And last but not least, we have also the Erasmus Teacher Academies, which envisage to develop a joint and innovative affecting learning modules. So these are parts which are already there, and we are looking into putting digital education content into the priorities for next year, for 2022. But it is too early to say more about this. The Recovery and Resilience Facility is the second point on investment I want to mention, and I will then come to the shortly to the finish. This is unprecedented, and we observe already through the plans that reach us that not only are the investments of the member states very significant, up to 10, 11% sometimes of the overall plan, but secondly, digital education is actually the top priority when it comes to investment in education and training. So it is very clear that the trend is there. Last point is the link to citizenship and democracy. In fact, in March, the Commission adopted the Digital Compass, where we have for the first time also identified universal digital education as an important prerequisite to support the development of democracy. And I think we are thinking of digital citizenship here as an expanded version of citizenship itself. And we are supporting it through several specific actions on the action plan, for example, guidelines for teachers and educators, but also a lot of different projects through Erasmus. Let me finish with the reference to the Copyright Directive. As you know, it is in its Article 5, it provides for a mandatory copyright exception covering the digital uses of protected content for illustration for teaching. And the deadline for this directive was the 7th of, for the transposition, excuse me, it was the 7th of June. And we now look forward and hope that the member states will communicate their transposition very soon. This new exception for illustration for teaching will provide for legal certainty to educational establishments when using copyright protected content, including online and across borders. And this Article 5 leaves a margin of discretion for national implementation, as always, allowing member states to favor the use of suitable licenses. And member states choosing this approach will have to ensure that educational licenses are easily available and that education establishments are aware of the existence of such licenses. An important novelty introduced by this article is the possibility of cross-border uses under the exception. This is a key element for digital education, which of course knows no country boundaries. So based on a legal fiction, in a way, the content made available by one teacher in one member state could be legally accessed by students affiliated to some of the to the same educational establishment, but located in other member states under specific conditions. Let me thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this discussion today and to contribute. And I very much look forward to be engaged also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Georgi, for this interesting update. Not only on projects and plans, but also for the perspectives on citizenship and democracy, the really big issues that we're facing and that we're going to discuss today. As we will hear in our panel discussion, digital education is a topic of great importance to our community, with so much time and resources going into producing quality digital educational materials. So we look forward to staying in touch with the Commission on this very important topic. Now I'm delighted to chair this panel discussion today. We have some expert speakers who will discuss what goes into producing innovative, high-quality, independent educational materials. They're going to discuss what authors, publishers, visual artists, and CMOs have learned from the COVID-19 crisis, and then the overall big issue, how the needs of a democratic society can be met, as well as those of writers, illustrators, and publishers in the education sector. As it was mentioned in the introduction, at the end of the 4 presentations, should you wish to ask a question to a panelist, you will be able to do so by raising your virtual hand, and I will, as far as time permits, invite you to ask your questions. But first, the 4 panelists, and the first of them, Maïa Ben-Simon, who is a French-American lawyer and works as a general counsel for the Société des gens de lettres. She was born in 1979 in the Paris region, and she was raised in a family of teachers, all readers attached to literature and education. After law school, Maïa decided her work to authors' rights. She dedicated her work to authors' rights and intellectual property. Today, her engagement is towards both literature and education. Maïa also is recently elected as Vice President of the European Writers' Council. So please, the floor is yours, Maïa.
Thank you, Igne. Thank you for this invitation and for this nice presentation also. The question here today is very, very important for authors and translators. The question here, investing in digital education and to achieve democracy through this is very important. And how do you achieve that purpose? Is by taking care of authors and translators. And then I want to talk about this today. And I thank Victor for his presentation and for pointing out that it's required to have authors on board and for the needs of reflection and the needs for the European approach. So thank you for that. And indeed, I want to raise 3 points today. And I want to start with the COVID, of course, because it hit hard authors and translators this past year. And I think we have to look into it before answering other questions. So starting, my first point will be to mention a follow-up monitoring of the crisis that EWC has done. And it's just done, it's going to be published early this summer. 27 organizations from 22 countries responded to this survey on the impact of COVID. So what are the findings of this survey? The first important thing that is unfortunately noticed is the lack of financial support that authors and translators have gone through from their governments. In 2/3 of the 22 responding countries, we noticed that the cultural sector, and especially the freelance writers and translators in the book sector, did not receive any financial compensation. For example, canceled events in schools, libraries, or universities, cancel lectures or teacher courses in the educational field. And I chose to start my presentation by saying this, because not all countries could support their authors, and it's very important that maybe in the future, and I hope we will not go through this crisis again, but it's important to avoid new drifts as such. The second point of these findings is that we find out there were many use of materials without writers' consent. What does it mean? From several countries, and I'll just say from Sweden, Romania, Poland, or the UK, I'd like to include, described very difficult situation where educational books were used, so educational material ebooks, webinar courses, academic textworks, and so on, were given away for free during the pandemic without consulting writers, so therefore without authorization. So at EWC, we remain extremely concerned about the effects of those hasty open access requirements, because it goes against a high quality as it was described in the introduction, but not only. It's too easy to enable free access. And many legal questions can be raised from that on. Whether users' rights granted to publishers or other platforms allow such free access to educational textworks? If yes, shouldn't they have been better coordinated with authors and translators? Well, if no, were these actions by publishers or other platforms authorized by the pandemic? In France, we call it, sometimes we can use the force majeure, we probably will ring a bell. But who pays for the fact that authors and translators in the educational fields have supported the society in the whole during the pandemic, while most governments in turn have rarely supported the authors with compensation? And that is, of course, linked to my first point. The third finding, which is also very important, is to acknowledge the cancellation of contracts and events. These are consequences in cascade. Events were cancelled in schools for authors, and I can say that for France, that authors and translators are very often in schools. It's a very high frequency activity for authors to appear in schools all year long during the school year. And also cancel teacher courses, cancel lectures and workshops for educational writers. So would it have been possible for platforms to organize e-schooling, and will it be in the future possible to organize e-schooling with authors that work with them already for physical content? Because these cancellations, as you know, have deprived authors from a very important part of their remuneration. So these findings again will be published early this summer, and I hope you will all look into it and learn from these findings that not always happy findings. My second point today is to acknowledge, of course, the needs for the public, and hopefully to make it possible to create best practice initiatives. Authors and translators do acknowledge the growth of e-schooling, and I did hear in the introduction that it's not one in place of the other, but it's a transformation. It's an integration from physical word to the digital content. And I think authors and translators agree to that. E-schooling is important today and has to be shaped according to the needs of the public. But let's pay attention that it's not at all costs. It is not now a time for diversity. And we should have both authors be taken care of as much in the digital world as it was in the physical world. And what place should be given to them. And we can talk about this too. The other acknowledgement is the growth of educational websites. Also, that's an acknowledgement of the need for such educational websites. And I think parents and teachers were very happy to find those platforms and made available during the pandemic. And this, of course, needs to go on. But also, educational websites are in progress. It is a good thing. Should educational material online be treated the same way as physical books? If no, how should authors be rewarded for example, upgrading online versions, especially when these upgraded versions are more expensive sometimes? What rights are granted and for what remuneration? That was my second point, acknowledging the growth. So for e-schooling and educational websites. So now I want to turn to the most important for EWC today, and to mention for authors and translators, the needs for authors and translators. As I was saying in the beginning, investing in high quality contents to achieve democracy is taking care of authors and translations. So what recommendations we can give? First, I have a few, 5 I might think. First is to improve maybe contracts for ebooks, digital exploitation, and e-learnings. For example, it could be important to have two types of remunerations for authors who make content for the physical book, but who also work hard to achieve high quality online contents. And it would be interesting to look into that. Also, maybe frame, legally speaking, the free dissemination of educational contents during pandemics or equivalent situations. For how long? How to compensate writers? How do we deal with that if it happens again in the future? So that was my first point. Second point is improvement of contract for intervention of authors as teachers. Writers of educational contents are often teachers. These writers maybe should be given priority when platforms, many publishers maybe, and schools organize e-schooling. Why not give them this priority since they already worked on the physical books, and maybe they would be interested to enhance and improve contents online. The third, but maybe one very important, is to improve member states' action, of course. And the first and foremost, and I'm happy that investment were talked about in the introduction. First would be the raise of budget for educational, academic, and teaching materials instead of promoting, of course, further exceptions and limitations. And I think that is a very important point. Second, of course, for countries that it is possible for that have collective management organization would be maintenance and protection of equipment levies and really fair compensation for authors in the educational fields via through those collective management organizations when again it is possible in countries. And third, also, of course, what we call at EWC the post-corona package for books and textworks and their authors, which have been given away for free to support society. Again, I have to point out that remedy of the state, even if it's an indirect support, would be fundamental, like funding research or funding e-schools. Usually, sometimes non-fiction authors are forgotten. And we are dealing here with non-fiction authors, of course. My fourth point for the needs of authors, maybe for the 2021-2023 future, is the support of monitoring. Again, it was mentioned before, and I would want to stress on this, to first encourage member states to implement frequent monitoring of the situation of freelance workers in all cultural sectors and subsectors like the book sector and its educational, academic, and teaching field to adjust measures. Second, would be to establish a continued coordinated stakeholder dialogue at EU level. So I'm, again, following what the introduction was saying, with the main participants and representatives in the cultural and the book sector, including the educational sector, of course, to work together on a sustainable future of a high quality education in Europe. Our fifth recommendation would, of course, not to forget the directive and beware of exceptions that come and make the life of authors and translators a bit harder every time there's an exception created. So we've been working a lot on this exception before the directive was passed, and each country has to pay attention how to implement this Article 5. And of course, we encourage member states to have compensations to this exception. The directive does not order it, makes it possible, and whenever possible, of course, it would be fundamental to follow this path. So here, I think I covered my time. Thank you for listening, and I'll give back.
Thank you, Maya. I think it's good that EWC has been so active in drawing attention to the issues that authors are facing, and not only monitoring the situation, but also putting forward recommendations for the recovery, resilience, and sustainability of the sector. So thank you very much. Now we turn to the publisher side. I'd like to introduce you Mr. Raffaele Grandi, CEO of EWC from Italy. Since 1980, Mr. Grandi has been working in the editorial management of the medical scientific publishing house, particularly in the academic and biomedical healthcare fields. Since 2000, as CEO, he has made considerable efforts and substantial investments to initiate and support the company's digital transformation process, publishing recognized multimedia books, which have been internationally distributed and translated worldwide. Raffaele has pre-recorded his intervention today, which includes a demonstration of one of his publishing house's impressive digital offerings. He is present with us today, and he will be happy to answer questions during the question and answer session following the panelists' presentations. So Vera Lia will now play Mr. Grandi's video for us. Thank you, Vera.
Thank you for the introduction. Dear colleagues and chair, my name is Raffaele Grandi and I am the CEO of EWC, a medical publishing house and member of the Italian Publishers Association. In representing all the Italian publishers, I would like to thank the IFRO chairman and Anne Bergman of FEP for this opportunity. Nowadays in Italy, the students are very busy at the university because courses are very compressed and the time for multidisciplinary data integration is drastically reduced. Additionally, they may find a lot of contents in internet, but sometimes they are not reliable. So students need an environment where they can find reliable resources to further in their knowledge and where the resources are related in a didactical way. Self-evaluation tests are also very requested by students to evaluate their knowledge. Therefore, we designed a platform providing a variety of validated contents by academic referees presented in a clear didactic way. Before the pandemic, lecture in classes, professors were able to capture attention as required. Resources given to the students may not be as helpful when reviewing and may violate copyrights. During the pandemic, live or pre-registered lectures, asynchronous learning, without student confrontation and therefore lower engagement can decrease attention from the students. Our platform offers reliable and validated resources both in Italian and English-Spanish for the extra-European market. Students have access to topics, lectures, self-assessment tests, and interactive laboratories, such as virtual microscope and physiology and chemistry experiments. A digital version of the book is also available for the duration of the course when a physical copy is bought. Professors and institutions have access to the same features as the students and additionally have access to the reports and students' feedback and the ability to add any resource they deem suitable for their courses. Furthermore, they are provided with tools and ready-to-use content to prepare the exams. Particular attention is given to accessibility feature as our platform is based on the Moodle development ecosystem, which provides equal functionality and information to all people. Who is involved in the digital education system process? The publisher has the central role to help the author transform his ideas and knowledge through their specific assets in a complete work. The publisher's work is not only to use telecommunication infrastructures and create or adapt software tools, but mainly to realize contents in a didactic manner, choosing the best approach to show each specific content. Furthermore, the didactic products is adaptable to any university course because the content is based on a national curriculum. Democracy in a digital education ecosystem means adequate and conformable offer based on educational needs, easy to use and constant access modulated on the user needs, considering the intellectual and financial efforts to achieve a high-level product. Intellectual property protection is fundamental, as well as fair remuneration of the rights of intellectual contents to sustain the continuous development of a digital education ecosystem.
It could work!
Thank you for your attention, and now we will show you an example of our platform.
This is the homepage of the Human Anatomy Atlas. We provide different ways to access the web resources. The main ones are lectures and topics, while the other icons give access based on media type. This menu has been designed by keeping in mind the idea of attracting the student attention to the lectures icon as a preferred way to start navigating through the contents, since this kind of access provides not only the selected content, but also gives suggestions to gain further knowledge on a specific topic by providing links to discover more resources on the platform. So let's start with lectures. These are videos, that is, resources with a low level of interaction. So they last around 20 minutes because after around 25 minutes the student's attention drops very quickly. For this reason, it is possible to find more than one lecture for each topic, because we prefer to provide many short videos rather than longer ones.
The mediastinum can be divided into two compartments.
Lectures are videos with animations projected so as to give a visualization approach to the topic while a voice-over explains the concept. This approach improves the memorization process because, particularly on the anatomy field, images are more beneficial for students to visualize the anatomical structures described in textbook. On the right side of the screen, it is always present the text read by the speaker. That way, if the student has a doubt, it is possible to pause the video, read the text and go on. On the upper left corner of the video, the topics of the lectures are displayed, making possible to directly select the topic of interest. On the bottom of the video, these buttons provide links to the related resources. This is the way the lectures push the student toward the discovery of resources available on the platform. When the video is showing part of a resource that is available in its totality on the platform, these buttons start blinking so as to attract students' attention. For example, we are talking about the mediastinum, a cavity of the thorax, and the lecture is showing a stratigraphical approach to this cavity, and one of the links is the access to an interactive resource showing all the resources on the mediastinum cavity. By clicking this link, the students open a new resource, and here it's possible to analyze layer by layer, starting from the back and moving to the front, all the main structures available in the mediastinum. On the right side, the student has a list of the main structures visible on this layer, and by moving the mouse, one can highlight these structures on the image and get their names. By using the slider, one can move back and forth deeper or toward the surface through the layers of the cavity. Now I go back to the lecture, so I'll use these links to show you other resources. For example, this is a 3D reconstruction. We can compare two different images, one from a CT scan and the other from a 3D image obtained using a volume rendering 3D technique at the same level of the CT. The student have a list of the main structures available on both images, and moving the mouse in one image or in the other, the student can discover the structures listed on the bottom of the screen. Then, by using the slider, it is possible to see how the structures are changing going from the top to the bottom of the cavity and vice versa. I can go back and select a video resource. Here we can see a thoracoscopy, where the main frame was extracted and the main visible structures labeled. On the right side, there is also a 3D reconstruction showing the main visible structure on the video, the arch of the aorta. With the access by topic, it is possible to select a topic of interest and have the list of all the resources available for that specific topic. For the nervous system, we have designed some lectures, and I would like to show you this new way to describe the nervous pathway. We provided the anatomical interactive schema and the main step of the pathway. By clicking on one of these steps, it is possible to get a description of the illustrated state of the pathway and to observe the track of the nervous signal. At the same time, on the right side of the screen, the diagram of the nervous pathway appears. It is also available as slider to see continuously the course of the nervous signal through the structures. Below, it's possible to get more information about the main structures crossed by the nervous signal by clicking on the highlighted rectangular frame. At the end, we have both the complete anatomical schema and the diagram of the pathway. The virtual microscope has similar features as the real one, so it's possible zooming and move the slide to search specific structures. Many of these slides have some notes that indicate the main visible structures. In addition, it's possible to click on it to get the name of the structure. We are using this virtual microscope also in other interactive resources projected to provide to students a guide to approach slides. This new resource is based on a slide without notes and a series of questions. This is the slide the student has to explore, and this is the first question. Students have to open the virtual microscope and observe the tissue to find the answer. Once given the answer, the students receive a feedback and an explanation. If they give the wrong answer, they have to answer once again. When students give the correct answer, a diagram starts to be composing on the screen. At the end, they get a diagram with all the right answers that represent a concept map of the slide exploration that can be used as a guide to explore any further.
Many thanks, Mr. Grandi. I think it's very interesting to have this insight into what digital education can look like with investment and innovation. Next panelist is Kate Main, who is a British-Belgian artist and writer based in Antwerp, Belgium. She's a painter and writer of fiction and essays on contemporary art, and also an experienced multilingual translator and editor. In her role as cultural organizer and curator, she has been managing SOFAM's artistic projects and partnerships since 2017, and she co-founded their project Pomona Art Fund in 2021 in support of artists and creative processes in Belgium. As an educator and speaker, she has an ongoing interest in bridging the gaps between the artistic community and the wider world. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Ingvar. And I'd like to say thank you to European visual artists and to IFRO and to SOFAM for also inviting an artist to the table. I'm going to tell a little story which perhaps relates to us all and also relates to artists. It has to do with what we've just been through. So when everything is different and looking to the arts. So in March last year, reality was put in the blender. It was rehashed, remixed, and then reassembled. We're still trying to make sense of the new picture. At first there was silence, and then birds found their voices in the urban quiet. The skies, a brilliant blue, stood in as our museums. Animals ventured onto deserted streets. Tethered to our homes, our own radius limited, we examined the ground beneath our feet. We'd get giddy at the sight of a flower or a clump of feathers trapped in the mud like a trembling angel. Those of us who were fortunate not to be affected by the harshest tragedy of the pandemic beheld a daily reckoning of numbers, abstractions we were forever mindful to read as people of flesh and blood. And so, as time passed, we practiced a new kind of mental origami. We folded our spirits in and slid ourselves into a social, physical, and psychological confinement. And yet, in isolation, something got in. Works of art, music, and literature reached in by printed and digital means. They held us upright and kept us connected. Now, when words and images appear side by side, they do not mean the same thing, for they affect our senses and our minds in different ways. They play upon our nervous system in ways that neuroscientists are only starting to discover. And into the gaps of meaning between word and image, our minds leap in. And the diversity of expression facilitates that state of flow that is so conducive to learning. To attune images to texts requires a special kind of collaboration between authors, makers of images, and designers. They illuminate each other's idioms, and they lift up the message in a way that is far more memorable than if a single voice were doing the teaching. I know of schools, namely the Antwerp Athenaeum, with their project Athena Syntax, where professional artists are brought into the classroom to activate creative processes with pupils. In the safe space of creative play, students can address complex issues, such as identity and belonging, but they also learn about pattern, form, color. These are also critical skills. And they unleash their talents in ways that are not limited to the arts. They get to explore themselves as creative human beings. I'll never forget the flash of insight on a pupil's face when I affirmed that, yes, she could assign meaning, any meaning, to a given color in her drawing, that its strength would grow or diminish according to what she put beside it. She looked at me in shock, as if she'd just realized that she had superpowers. So, artists are forever creating something new. It's a gift. I think we all agree about that. Yet, for artists, insecurity is a trusted companion for whoever undertakes a life in the arts. The decision to become an artist is not random. In economic terms, the choice is hardly sensible. Artists tend not to receive a 13th month of pay. They have no group insurance. The build-up of pension rights is often beyond their reach. There are costs too. To make art, you need materials and space, and real estate is expensive. Artists need to block off time from everyday concerns to find the emptiness that is essential for any creative process. So I would like to ask, how much more thriving could the arts be? How much happier our communities and wealthier in insight and inventivity if artists could receive suitable means of income and remuneration? So who has the audacity to propose a courageous increase in funding for the arts? How can new voices be stimulated and established ones recognized? How can a social status be developed for artists that acknowledges their specific circumstances? And which clauses in contracts help artists gain more stability? And how does one respect existing authors' rights in moral and economic terms? The answers to these questions lead to measurable ways of giving artists the opportunities and support that they deserve. Institutions could, for example, instruct their lawyers, and here I'm talking about museums, cultural institutions, also people who are drawing up copyright agreements, etc. You could instruct your lawyers to direct their judicial prowess to the interests of both the artists and the community. And artists are critical. They see opportunities where others see none. Are they being sufficiently called upon to contribute to our societal, educational, and mental well-being? So I would say there are many silver linings to the COVID crisis, and one of them is the realization that, gosh, we can work together. If you'd like to activate the arts so that a moment of enchantment sets in, this can only happen when artists are involved as equal partners. Everyone in these times is unstable, and the insecurity that is so familiar to artists is now being felt by all of us. The Bauhaus artist and educator Annie Albers said, "Art is something that makes you breathe with a different kind of happiness." Isn't that what we want? A different kind of happiness? The COVID-19 crisis has led many to reconsider what they truly want from life. Is this not the perfect moment to take a leap into the void together?
Many thanks, Kate. That was very interesting, I think, and it was interesting in a poetic manner, which I think spoke to all of us. And I think it's good to be reminded of the importance of the visual sector in this discussion. Now we've had the writers and the publisher and the visual artist perspective. Now we'll turn to the CEO, to the collective management side. And I'd like to welcome Anders Christian Rasch, who is the CEO of Copydan Writing in Denmark, where he has been CEO since 2008. And Copydan has managed to successfully develop new agreements with the educational area, as well as within the area of both private and public businesses. So over to you, Anders, please.
Thank you very much, Inge, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this conference. And thank you for your introduction. Just some information before I start my presentation. If you hear some barking, it's my dog, and it's downstairs, and I hope that it will stay there, just to let you know. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just my name. Nothing interesting about that, except that, oh, sorry. Go on. Well, regarding our company, it's very simple. Copydan Writing was founded because people started to photocopy, especially in schools, and it was important to find a way to remunerate the right holders because of that. Now we cover all kinds of digital copies also. Next slide, please. The legal framework in Denmark and in the other Nordic countries, the legal framework is the extended collective license. It is a smart system because the license with the right holders is extended to cover all works. And that's very important when it comes to mass use of works in the educational sector. The system has in fact now been adopted by the EU in the DSM directive. And if you're very interested in where it is, it's in Article 12 in the DSM directive. Next slide, please, Vera. Well, the system works like a cultural circuit. First of all, our customers, they copy and they report. We are receiving and registering the copies, and we will pay out remuneration on an individual basis to all the right holders. Some of the right holders are even foreign right holders. Because the right holders are receiving remuneration from copyright writing, they are able to create new material, and then it's all over again. Our customers will be able to copy and report to us. Well, next slide, please. So what does that mean in real life? I'm just sitting here as an administrator telling you all about this, but I will try to show you a video where right holders explain what it means to her and her pupils. Vera, can you help me?
Børn er tit ret bramfrie og direkte i deres tilbagemeldinger, når jeg besøger skoleklasser for at teste et materiale. Derfor ved jeg ret hurtigt, om noget fungerer i praksis, eller om det skal justeres, så niveauet passer. Jeg holder mig konstant opdateret i, hvad der sker i litteraturen, i mediebilledet og i børns verden i det hele taget. Og så selvfølgelig også i de fagdidaktiske strømninger og diskussioner. Børn i dag lever i en helt anden verden, end dengang jeg begyndte at skrive læremidler for over 20 år siden. Og det skal selvfølgelig afspejles i undervisningen. For at skrive gode, moderne læremidler til danskfaget kræver det, at jeg ved, om det fungerer i praksis. Derfor tager jeg nogle gange ud på skoler og afprøver mine forløb og taler med eleverne om dem. Der er mange led i arbejdet med at udvikle nye læremidler. Det tager tid både at udvikle idéerne, skrive materialet og teste det med børn. Kopipengene giver mig den tid. De gør, at jeg kan arbejde fokuseret på at udvikle nyt.
Thank you, Vera. Could you give me the next slide, please? So the organizers posed a question, what we have learned from the COVID-19 situation. Well, the most important thing that we have learned is, in fact, that we were able to help the educational institutions with their online education. And that's because our licenses are flexible, and it also includes digital copies. So we were able to also give a license to one of the educational institutions that would very much like to digitize out-of-commerce works, because it wasn't possible for the students to go, of course, to the educational institution. So there was a possibility to access the out-of-commerce works online. Other projects were, for instance, the newspapers that were non-existing newspaper at now was digitized and made available on the platforms of libraries, online platforms of libraries. That was another project that we had with the libraries. So we were able to help both educational institutions and libraries in this situation. Next slide. Yeah, I guess that we will wait with the questions to after this presentation.
Thank you, Anders. Thank you to all the panelists. Now we have promised that you will be able to ask questions, but unfortunately I need to say that we are running out of time. But I think I'll allow for one question, if there is one, to one of the panelists. If so, the first to raise the digital hand will be allowed to ask a question. I think I would be able to see so in the participant list. Then I'd like to ask just one question myself, which will be for Mr. Grandi. And I'd like you to tell a little about how the key elements for the future sustainability of the academic publishing sector is, in your view. What do you think, when looking to the future, what will be key elements for sustainability for your sector? If you can give us a short comment on that, then we'd like to turn to our closing remarks, please.
Thank you for interesting question. University textbooks are one of the fundamental elements in the quality of education. The central role is the learning processes, which was even more evident during the pandemic, when they became an essential support to distance learning. Policy measures can play a fundamental role to ensure the right to quality education at all levels, including the university level. In particular, to support the purchase of academic textbooks by less affluent families through tax relief policies or dedicated bonuses. To support publishers' investment in digital innovation, publishers have been investing in digital education for a long time and have demonstrated that they have the know-how. For publisher, economic policies to support investment can be applied with grants, government incentive, and tax credit on investment for culture. For institutions, facilitate the acquisition of user licenses through contribution to institutions to encourage the recognition of university credits to the professor for the design of advanced teaching tools and content to further their academic careers. Furthermore, it is imperative to support copyright against piracy, both in physical and new digital forms, and raise awareness on copyright with dedicated initiatives. Piracy causes severe economic damage to the educational ecosystem, translating in job losses and lower content innovation, and should be fought intensively. It is essential to increase the penalties for those who harm this ecosystem, request greater control by the appropriate judicial entities, give certainty on the application of the penalty. It is, lastly, it's necessary to promote knowledge of the correct use of copyrighted content in schools and academic institutions, promote the use of licenses by institution and professor, establish a collaboration of transparency and control over the contents used by professors in their courses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure there would have been many more questions for all the panelists if we could continue in this session. But we need to go on. And I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our last speaker of the day, Dr. Igor Pesek, who is head of the Digital Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport in Slovenia. As most of you will know, the Slovenian presidency of the Council of the EU will take over from the current Portuguese presidency on 1st of July and run for the rest of this year. We are very interested to hear about the plans of the upcoming Slovenian presidency in the coming months. So, Dr. Pesek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingve. This discussion was very interesting for me because I'm also dealing with this in my unit, and also in my is like my in my research interests. Just a second, I have to share it. So it's my pleasure to present you our current program of the presidency. Our priorities can be summed up as efforts to achieve the European vision of knowledge, education, and research for a green digital future. So education and research are the main vehicles for the future development of European society and the European way of life. The EU vision in this field is rooted in the core European values such as democracy and human rights. So if we want to successfully meet these challenges of modern society, we must equip all generations with competences that go beyond traditional knowledge and skills. This new skill set should help build active citizenship, enabling us to better understand the environment and co-create a digital and green society. So, sorry. Yes, our ministry is responsible for 4 areas: education, research, youth, and sport. So we are a very large ministry. In these areas, we have identified 4 overarching priorities: inclusive governance, new knowledge and skills, green transition and digital transformation, including also artificial intelligence. In the field of education, we will promote different synergies between higher education and research. We will seek to contribute to the development of the transformation agenda, as well as the European Universities Initiative. At the joint meeting of Directors General for Higher Education and European Research Area and Innovation Committee, we plan to address the question of synergies. If I move on to the topic of governance of the new strategic framework, we will advocate for a European education area with clear goals and inclusive governance on all levels. Also, our next priority aims to address the current context of constant change on the one hand, and the need to provide children and young people with a high quality education on the other hand. In this respect, we support Commission's activities for preparing Council recommendation on blended learning for high quality inclusive primary and secondary education, as Georgi mentioned earlier. We are also convinced that new forms of blended learning are highly relevant, not only in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, but also with a view to ongoing technological changes in society. We will also tackle the question of artificial intelligence, particularly its use in education processes, together with the ethical aspects of it. During our presidency, we will also work on a new European agenda for adult learning. We see adult learning not only in the context of the labor market, but especially as an important part of lifelong learning. This will allow us to build on the results of the Skills Summit that we organized together with the OECD and the Commission in October last year. Now, let me just show you some events that we plan to organize. There will be a high-level ministerial conference on the role of education and training in the digital era, and it will address all and also the licenses, also all that we talked today about digital, and it will be a 2-day event in November, and we will be like a live event, hopefully. This conference will provide a platform to address inevitable question of how to adapt education and training to even more digital society, and how to best use artificial intelligence for and in education. We will also have 5 different meetings on Directors General and also other meetings and working levels. We sincerely hope that in autumn we will be able to welcome you in Slovenia, and in Slovenian with word dobrodošli, welcome. So and also face to face in live or in present, not virtual. So thank you. It was a really nice conversation today.
Thank you, Igor, for this very concise and very interesting update on your plans. We hope that the insights provided at this event today also can contribute to your work, and wish you all the very best for the presidency.
Thank you.
I'm happy that you stayed with us the whole time, and we will be happy to stay in touch on this important topic also for your term in the presidency. Now, on behalf of IFRO and our partners EVA, EWC and FEP, thank you very much to all of our speakers today for taking the time to discuss this very important topic. It's been an honor to have representatives from the 3 EU institutions with us, as well as our expert panelists to hear your views. Now, looking ahead, our community will continue to work together as well as with the EU institutions and other stakeholders to help ensure the sustainability of the sector and its ability to offer the quality educational content that is so vital for our democratic society. This second Restart Conversations event has been very insightful. We look forward to more conversations like this with our community and representatives from the EU institutions. We're looking forward to seeing each other also physically, but I hope also this digital event has been rewarding for everyone that has participated in it. And I'd like to say goodbye to everyone and stay safe.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.